I've rarely wanted to follow anything less than that, quite honestly. Hello, I'm Rachel Creeger. I'm one of Lynn Ruth's very few Orthodox Jewish friends, and if you're playing Lynn Ruth Memorial Bingo, I also met her at the Edinburgh Fringe. I met her in 2014 in the performers area at C Venues, where she was schlepping a whole load of bags. She sat down next to me, her Judah went off, and a conversation began, which lasted for a number of years, predominantly about soup. Lynn Ruth was there with her show Granny's Gone Wild, and I didn't really know anything much about it, but she insisted I should come and see it the next day because, as she said, all C Venues performers get a free pass. And I don't know what I was expecting, but to see a powerful older woman stripping and telling stories and making everyone laugh with her was my first real introduction to the force of nature that was our friend Lynn Ruth Miller. She and I shared a lot of common ground, very proud of our Jewish heritage, but very questioning of any kind of dogma, an obsession with traditional food, including her secret passion for grivenas, which are like kosher scratchings, bit less pork. And a love for old Jewish jokes, the sort that spin through our cultural history over centuries in many different versions. When I wrote my debut solo show, she insisted that we perform a double preview together, and we did so at the old sorting office in Barnes. And at the end of the show, she said to me, "You and I, Rachel," I can't do accents, I just sound racist. "You and I, Rachel, we're the same." She said, "We describe ourselves as comedians, but really we're two old school Jewish storytellers who can spin a yarn but can't write a punchline." And thus began a long-running, quite friendly, sometimes, argument between us about whether what either of us did was really stand-up. I loved bumping into Lynn Ruth at gigs. I really loved bumping into her late at night on the train home from gigs. I loved meeting up with her for a cuppa and a chat during the Fringe, where she was absolutely herself and demanded nothing less of you. One highlight of the years that I knew Lynn Ruth was actually last year, where she was a guest on the podcast I host with another Jewish comedian, Philip Simon. And the other guest was our mutual friend, Daniel Kainer. And I'm sure Daniel would agree that whenever Lynn Ruth was around, her incredible tales really stole the show. Yours were also excellent, Daniel. Never let it be said that I am putting one above. It's her day. But she told us some fascinating stories that I'd never heard before about her past and career, and at least two which were both hilariously indiscreet and also highly litigious and had to be edited out completely. She had our producer, Russell, a very experienced professional, with his head in his hands, roaring with laughter, and all we could see was his shoulders shaking when he was meant to be telling us what to do next. And after the recording, he said to us, "When it comes to editing the parts where the two of you are talking to Lynn Ruth, cut for her. That's my only instruction. It will give the audience the best show. Just edit for Lynn Ruth," which I think is excellent advice for all of us. For the past few years, I've been helping with the comedy programming for Limud, which is a huge Jewish arts and culture festival. It runs all around the world, but has its main event in the UK over the winter holiday. And I tried over the years to encourage Lynn Ruth to come along, but she was always a bit reluctant. She'd had some challenging home team gigs in synagogues and community centres around the world, and she said, "Jewish audiences have never really been on my side." She finally agreed to come for a short visit in 2019, and she was so apprehensive about doing a solo show on the evening she arrived that she insisted I open and close for her, a kind of friendly brackets. I agreed only to introduce her and step in if it was necessary, because I knew it was never going to be necessary, was it? I simply told the audience, "This is one of my funniest friends. You're going to adore her," and I left the stage. 10 minutes later, people were sobbing with laughter, texting their friends and partners, telling them, "You have to come and see this amazing comedian." And it got to the point that the room was so full that the health and safety rep had to come in and stop anyone else from entering. Word then got out that she'd be closing my late night comedy show shortly afterwards, and people began queuing in the bar from word of mouth before the previous show had come close to ending. And having spoken to the health and safety rep again, we spent about 15 minutes removing any tables from the cabaret area to change it into a performance space because we needed to accommodate so many new fans of Lynn Ruth Miller. She received a standing ovation, whoops and cheers, and was so elated to have smashed 2 gigs at such a prestigious event. But I kept telling her that I knew she'd rock it because Limud is full of the sort of Jews who would get her. The following day, she and I presented an audience with type show, and I watched an audience of about 500 people fall in love with her. We spent an hour chatting about her life and memories, taking questions from the floor, and a full room gradually became a jam-packed and, again, illegally full one. She was with me at Limud for less than 48 hours, and in that time, she won over the entire festival, making thousands of new fans and friends, and was invited back the following year online during lockdown. I'm lucky to have lots of great memories of her, but this one, where I got to share her fabulous, witty, very naughty brilliance with all these other people and see her sparkle and shine, that might be my favourite. But Lynn Ruth and I had planned to revisit that idea this October just gone as part of the UK's first Jewish Fringe Festival, Tzitzit. We were in discussion with the Phoenix Artists Club, a favourite venue for both of us, about an evening with Lynn Ruth Miller and her friend Rachel Creeger, which would definitely have been an evening with Lynn Ruth Miller and Rachel Creeger. She was also due to headline a special lineup at the closing event of the festival, which I was comparing in collaboration with Funny Women. And this was then obviously curtailed by her diagnosis. Although even up to a few short weeks before she passed away, she was still fairly insistent that we would be performing there together. As I said to some of our friends yesterday, 87-year-old woman dies is not really a headline that anyone would take any notice of. But it felt like a shock. She was in the middle of so much, and it breaks my heart that we'll never get to share a stage again. Maybe today. I'll miss her pithy comments and her hot takes on everything. And I'd still say that both of us can write a killer punchline, even if it does come at the end of a long story about soup. Although Lynn Ruth wasn't religious, I wanted to honour her with a poem that was connected to our culture. And it was written by another kick-ass Jewish woman called Hannah Senesh. So I'm going to read it in Hebrew and then translate it for you. יש כוכבים שאורם מגיע ארצה, רק כאשר הם עצמם עבדו ואינם. יש אנשים שזיו זכרם מאיר, כאשר הם עצמם אינם יותר בתוכנו. אורות אלה, המאביקים בחשכת הלילה, הם שמראים לאדם את אורות הדרך. There are stars whose light reaches the earth only after they themselves are lost and have disappeared. And there are people of whom their splendid memory continues to brighten us even after they are no longer amongst us. These lights, which shine in the darkest of nights, they guard all people, and for us, they illuminate the path. Thank you very much, and I'm going to introduce Daniel Kaner.